Sometimes a man stops talking not because he has nothing to say, but because words feel like stones he can't lift anymore. I've known men like that, good men who closed themselves off after losing what mattered most. This story is about one such man, a loyal dog that wouldn't give up on him, and a wounded stranger who reminded him that hiding from pain doesn't make it go away. It's about the hard choice between staying safe in your loneliness or stepping out to help someone when you know it might cost you the only peace you've managed to find. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago. Caleb Stone stared at the tin cup on the table, watching a fly circle the rim. He counted 47 seconds before it landed. He counted everything these days: fence posts, ceiling beams, the ticks of the clock, 19 days since he'd spoken to another living soul. His hand moved toward the cornbread, stopped halfway. Shadow's bowl scraped across the floor, the dog pushing it with his nose. Amber eyes fixed on Caleb's face. Not hungry. The words felt foreign in his mouth. Shadow whined, low and urgent. The dog hadn't touched his breakfast either. In 3 years, Shadow had never refused food. Caleb's chest tightened. He stood, boots heavy on the pine planks, and walked to the window. Red clay stretched south toward the Badlands, heat shimmer turning the horizon liquid. Something was wrong. If you're watching from ranch country or anywhere wide open, spaces still matter. We'd be grateful to know where you're tuning in from. Shadow followed him to the fence line, but wrong. The dog usually ranged ahead, nose to ground, checking gopher holes. Today he stayed close, shoulder brushing Caleb's leg every third step. The wire needed mending where something had tried to squeeze through. Coyote. Probably. Caleb knelt, set down his toolbox. Before his hand reached for the cutters, Shadow had them in his mouth, dropping them at his knee. Caleb's throat tightened. He picked up the cutters, felt the worn grip where his fingers had smoothed the wood over years of use. His lips parted. He stopped. Bit down on the word. 19 days was 19 days. 20 made a rounder number. The wire fought him. Rust had eaten into the twist, made it brittle. He gripped harder, felt the metal bite into his palm through the worn leather glove. The cutter slipped. Wire snapped back, caught his thumb below the knuckle. Blood welled up, dark red against the dirt packed into the creases of his skin. He watched it drip onto the clay. 1 drop, 2, 3. He wrapped his bandana around it, the fabric already stiff with old sweat. Shadow whined, pushed his nose against Caleb's wrist. The dog had never done that before. Caleb pulled new wire from the spool, threaded it through the post holes. His hands knew the work without thought. Wrap twice, twist 3 times, pull tight. Colonel Hendricks used to say a good medic could suture a wound or mend a fence with the same hands. 20 years since Caleb had sutured anything. The wire held, though that was something. Shadow moved 5 feet away, sat, staring south toward the Badlands. His ears were up, alert, a growl built low in his chest, barely audible. Caleb followed his gaze. Nothing but mesquite and red rock. Heat shimmer making the horizon dance. He listened. Cicadas, a hawk somewhere distant, wind pushing through creosote. "What is it, boy?" The words came out before he could stop them. His count broken. Shadow didn't turn. Kept staring south, that growl still rumbling. Then he looked back at Caleb. Those amber eyes held something that made the hair on Caleb's neck stand up. Not fear. Certainty. Shadow knew something he didn't. Caleb woke to scratching at the door. His neck ached from the rocker, stiff from hours hunched forward. The coal oil lamp had burned down to nothing, glass chimney black with soot. Through the window, false dawn was turning the sky the color of old bruises. The scratching came again, insistent. Claws on wood. He pushed himself up, joints cracking loud in the silence. Crossed the room in 4 steps, lifted the latch. Shadow pushed through before the door was half open. Red mud caked the dog's coat so thick Caleb couldn't see the black underneath. Burrs matted in the fur along his flanks. Some pressed so deep they'd drawn blood. The dog's left foreleg didn't touch the ground, right favoring it, not putting full weight down. Caleb dropped to his knees. His hands moved without thought, running along Shadow's ribs, feeling for breaks, swelling, anything wrong beneath the mud and fur. The ribs were intact. He lifted each paw, turned them over. The pads were torn, bleeding in places, worn down to raw pink flesh. He cupped Shadow's skull in both hands, felt along the bone for lumps, checked the eyes for signs of concussion. The pupils were even. No swelling, no blood from the ears. Shadow licked his face once, quick, then pulled away and paced to the door, turned back, whined. Easy. Caleb's voice came out rough, unused. Let me look at you. Shadow ignored him, paced back to Caleb, grabbed his shirt sleeve in his teeth, pulled. Caleb's arm jerked forward. What are you... Shadow pulled harder, teeth locked on fabric, not biting through, but pulling with his whole body, haunches driving back toward the door. I got work. The words came out slow. First full sentence in, he'd lost count. More than 19 days now. Fence needs finishing. Shadow released the sleeve, trotted to the porch edge, looked back, whined again, higher pitched this time, urgent. He'd never made that sound before. Caleb stood, followed to the porch. Shadow was already down the steps, 3 feet into the yard. The dog stopped, turned, waiting. You need water? Food? Shadow ignored the words, took 3 more steps south, toward the Badlands, stopped again, those amber eyes fixed on Caleb's face, holding something he'd never seen there before. Not the usual patient obedience, the willingness to follow commands. Demand. Caleb's chest tightened. He looked at his shirt sleeve where Shadow had gripped it. Red mud smeared across the fabric, still damp. He rubbed his thumb over the stain. The mud had come from somewhere south. The disputed territory, the place where water rights turned neighbors into corpses. Shadow whined again. Caleb walked back inside, moved to the kitchen by habit, scooped cornmeal into Shadow's bowl, poured water from the pitcher, set it down. Shadow didn't move from the porch. You gotta eat. The dog stayed at the porch edge, staring south. Caleb gripped the doorframe. His knuckles went white against the weathered wood. Fool thing. Following a dog into Badlands. Disputed land. People got killed down there over water rights, over claims that had been filed and refiled until nobody remembered who owned what first. 2 years since he'd crossed into that territory. 2 years since they'd found Jacob Merrick hanging from a cottonwood with a rope around his neck and his tongue black and swollen. Sarah's voice came to him, clear as if she were standing beside him. Doing nothing's still a choice, Kyle. He'd said that to her once, when she wanted to help the Navajo family camped near the creek, the ones the town wanted gone. He'd told her it was none of their business, that getting involved meant trouble. She'd looked at him with those gray eyes. Then trouble's what we choose. 3 months later, she was dead. Childbirth. Baby girl who never drew a single breath. Shadow barked, sharp, impatient. Caleb moved back into the house, grabbed his hat from the peg, shrugged into his jacket. The medical kit was in the barn where he'd left it. Oiled leather case tucked behind the saddle rack. He hadn't opened it in 8 years, but he kept it stocked anyway. Carbolic acid, muslin strips, quinine powder, old habits from cavalry days. When keeping your kit ready meant the difference between a man living or bleeding out while you fumbled for supplies. He saddled the bay mare, worked the cinch tight. Shadow was already moving south, limping but purposeful, not stopping to see if Caleb would follow. Caleb swung up into the saddle. The mare shifted beneath him, sensing his tension. He touched his heels to her flanks, kept the pace slow so Shadow could keep up. They reached the property line marked by cairnstones somebody had stacked 20 years before any of this land had papers on it. Shadow didn't pause, crossed right over into the disputed territory. Caleb pulled the mare to a stop. Red clay stretched ahead, broken by mesquite and rock formations that looked like broken teeth. This was the land men killed over. Water rights, spring access, things worth more than gold when the summer drought hit and cattle started dying. Shadow turned back, looked at him, waiting. Caleb stared at the mud stain on his sleeve, still damp, still red. "All right," he said. "Show me." Shadow moved forward. Caleb followed. The clay turned the mare's hooves red within 10 steps. The smell hit him. Next creosote and dust and something else underneath. Something copper sharp that made his stomach clench. Blood, old enough to have dried but fresh enough to still smell. 2 miles in. The mining shack appeared like a broken tooth against the red rock. Half the roof had collapsed inward, timbers jutting at angles that made no structural sense. Shadow stopped 20 feet out, looked back once, then moved forward slow. Not his usual trot. Stalking, Caleb dismounted, ground-tied the mare. His hand moved to the Winchester in its scabbard, fingers closing around the stock. He pulled it free, kept it low and ready but not aimed. Old cavalry habits: show you're armed. Don't show you're looking for a fight. The blood hit his eyes before the smell registered. Handprint on the doorframe. Fingers smeared downward like whoever left it had been sliding, not standing. Fresh enough the flies hadn't found it yet. 2 hours old, maybe 3. Shadow pushed through the half-open door. Caleb followed, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness inside. The roof hole let in enough light to see by barely. Dust hung in the air, thick enough to taste. Then he saw her. Apache woman, maybe 30, maybe more, hard to tell with her face drawn tight like that. She was curled against the far wall, knees pulled to chest, one hand pressed against her left thigh. Even in the dim light, he could see the cloth strips wrapped around her leg, dark with dried blood. The fabric had been torn from her skirt. He could see where the hem ended, ragged just below her knee. A Spencer rifle lay beside her right hand. Single shot, cavalry issue. Same as he'd carried during the Apache campaigns. The breech was open, empty. His eyes cataloged the rest in seconds. Leather document case on the ground near her feet. Strap still across her shoulder, water-stained and scratched. She'd been clutching it when she collapsed. Canteen tipped over beside her. Empty. He could see the damp ring in the dirt where the last water had spilled out. A flour sack in the corner with dried meat bundled inside. Blanket folded neat, serving as pillow where her head had been before she'd pulled herself into defensive position. She wasn't caught here. She'd chosen this place. Shadow moved to her side, sniffed once, then positioned himself between her and Caleb. Low growl, warning, easy, bud. Caleb kept his voice quiet. Set the Winchester against the wall by the door where she could see it, where she'd know he wasn't holding it. I ain't here to hurt nobody. Shadow's growl deepened. Caleb knelt slow, 5 feet back, close enough to assess, far enough to not be a threat. His cavalry training kicked in automatic checklist he'd run through 1,000 times in field hospitals. Breathing first, he watched her chest rise and fall. Shallow, but regular. Not labored. Good sign. Pulse next. He could see it in her throat. Rapid flutter like a bird's wing, faster than it should be. Fever, probably. Infection. The smell reached him then, sweet and wrong, like meat starting to turn. He knew that smell. Wound going bad. Ma'am, he said. No response. Ma'am, I got medical training, cavalry field medic. I'd like to help if you'll let me. Her eyes stayed closed, but her hand moved, slow and deliberate, sliding from her thigh toward the rifle. Shadow's growl cut off. The dog looked back at Caleb, then at the woman, then sat down. Caleb had never seen him do that before, make a choice that wasn't the one Caleb would have given. He moved closer. 3 feet now. Shadow didn't stop him. Up close. He could see more. The cloth strips around her leg were torn from a calico dress. Blue and white checks. The knot was military neat. Someone had taught her field medicine. The blood had soaked through in the center, dried black at the edges. 2 days old, maybe? The skin around the wound was swollen. Hot red spreading out in lines he could see even through the dirt. But she'd prepared. The flour sack in the corner he could see dried meat inside. Maybe a week's worth if you rationed. Herbs bundled with twine, hanging from a roof beam that hadn't collapsed. Yarrow had looked like. For bleeding, Hermann had naught her that too. She'd chosen this shack because it had one door. Sight lines to the approach, back wall solid. Defensive position. She wasn't running blind. She was making a stand. His hands moved without consulting his brain, reaching for the medical kit on his belt. The oiled leather case he'd stocked that morning. Same way he'd stocked it every morning for 8 years, even though he'd never used it. Carbolic acid, muslin strips, quinine powder. Her eyes opened. Dark eyes, black as creek stones. Not pleading, assessing, she looked at his hands, at the medical kit, at his face. Her lips moved. Na Hilton. He didn't know Apache, but the tone told him enough. Warning, not help me run. Her hand closed around the Spencer's stock, pulled it toward her. The movement cost her. He saw her face go gray, jaw clench against pain. But she got the rifle between them. Empty or not, it was a line drawn. He raised both hands, palms out. Easy. I ain't here to hurt you. She stared at him. Her eyes went to the Winchester by the door, back to his face, measuring, calculating. Then why? She said English. Mission school perfect. Each word shaped careful. Are you here? The question hit him like a fist. Why was he here? following a dog into disputed territory, toward a woman who might be wanted for something, who clearly had someone after her. Smart thing would be to leave water, ride for town, get Doc Brennan out here. 6 hours there and back, professional help. But 6 hours was a long time for someone with fever and infection, and whoever was after her closing in, his mouth opened, closed. He looked at Shadow, who sat there calm now, like this was exactly where they were supposed to be. Sarah's face flashed in his mind. Clear as the day she'd said it. Some things are worth standing for, Cal, even when you're scared. He'd been scared then, too. Scared of getting involved, scared of trouble, scared of losing what little he had. So he'd done nothing. And 3 months later, she was dead anyway, and he'd spent 8 years proving she was right he was a coward. His hands dropped to the medical kit, unbuckled it. Because my dog seemed to think it was important. Her eyes narrowed. Not trust, but maybe less suspicion. She watched his hands as he pulled out the brown bottle of carbolic acid. The muslin strips. That leg needs cleaning, he said. Infection spreading. You can see the red lines. I know what infection looks like. Then you know you got maybe 2 days before it's in your blood. After that, nothing I can do will help. She didn't answer. Her hand stayed on the rifle. He waited. Cavalry medics learned patience in the field. You couldn't force a wounded man to accept help. You had to let them choose. The silence stretched. He could hear his own breathing, hers, Shadow's panting. Outside, a hawk screamed. Wind pushed through the collapsed roof. Stirring dust. Her hand loosened on the rifle. Not letting go, but loosening. You a doctor, field medic, cavalry, and learned enough to keep men alive till they could get to real doctors. You're good at it. He thought about that. Thought about the men who'd lived. The ones who hadn't. The ones who died because he was too slow, or didn't have the right supplies, or just because a bullet had torn through something vital, and all the training in the world couldn't fix it. Good enough, he said. Another silence. Then she moved her hand away from the rifle, laid it flat on the dirt beside her. Don't make me regret this, she said. He nodded, moved closer, knelt beside her leg. The smell was stronger here, sweet rot mixing with dust and sweat. He reached for the knot holding the cloth strips. Her hand caught his wrist. Her grip was weak, fever weak, but her eyes were sharp. They're coming. The men who did this. If you help me, you're part of it. Part of what? The fight. He looked at her hand on his wrist. At the document case still strapped across her body. At the Spencer rifle that had been fired until it ran dry. A woman alone in the Badlands with a rifle and legal papers didn't add up to anything good. How many men? Enough. He could leave now, should leave, ride back home, keep his head down, stay out of whatever this was. Smart play, safe play. His wrist turned under her grip, gentle, until his fingers found her pulse, rapid, thready, fever burning through her. Let me see the wound, he said. She held his eyes for a long moment. Then her hand dropped away. He untied the knot. Getting her on the horse took time. Her legs wouldn't hold. Caleb had to lift her. One arm under her knees, one behind her back. She went rigid the moment he touched her, every muscle locking. But she didn't fight, just stiffened like wood and let him do it. She weighed less than she should. He could feel her ribs through the torn calico dress. How long had she been running? 3 weeks, she'd said, living on dried meat and creek water, moving at night, hiding during the day. He settled her in front of the saddle, sideways so her injured leg hung free. The wound he'd cleaned and rebandaged, a deep graze, where the bullet had carved a furrow through the meat of her thigh without hitting bone. Bad enough, with infection setting in, but not as bad as it could have been. She'd been lucky, if you could call any of this lucky. She gripped the saddle horn with both hands, knuckles white. Shadow was already moving, heading north on a different route than they'd come. Longer way, avoiding the main trail. The ride took 3 hours. Sun climbed, turned the air thick and hot. Sweat ran down Caleb's back, soaked through his shirt between his shoulder blades. The woman didn't speak, just held on, swaying with the mare's gait. Her breathing came shallow and quick, pain with every jostle. Once her grip loosened, started to slip. He caught her with one arm around her waist, pulled her back upright. "Stay with me," he said. Her head turned slightly, not looking at him, looking at his hands where they held the reins. He realized she was staring at his left hand, at the place where a wedding ring should be. He'd tucked it under his shirt that morning on its leather cord, same as every morning, hidden against his chest where it couldn't catch on things. Couldn't remind him every time he looked down. Her eyes moved to his face, then forward again. She didn't ask. They passed through a canyon where the walls rose steep on both sides, blocking the sun. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in the shade. The woman shivered despite the heat. Fever, probably. He'd given her quinine powder mixed with water back at the shack. But fever took time to break. Shadow led them through a dry wash, up an incline, around a stand of mesquite, taking the long way, the smart way. Anyone tracking them would expect the direct route. They reached the ranch as shadows started stretching east. Shadow led them straight to the porch, then sat, waiting. Caleb dismounted first, reached up. This time she didn't stiffen, just let herself fall forward into his arms. Too exhausted to care anymore. He carried her inside. The house was dim, shutters closed against the afternoon heat. He shouldered through to the bedroom, laid her on the bed. The rope mattress creaked under her weight. First time another person had been in that bed since Sarah died. First time the ropes had held anything but his own body for 8 years. She opened her eyes, took in the room fast. Door behind him, window to the left, shutters half open, showing the yard, no other exits. Her gaze moved to the rifle hanging over the mantel in the main room, visible through the bedroom door. "You gonna run now?" he asked. "You gonna stop me? Can you walk?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. He went to the kitchen, put water on to boil. The stove was still warm from that morning, the morning when he'd made coffee and cornbread and eaten neither. The cornbread sat on the counter now, hard from sitting out. He broke off a piece, forced himself to chew, tasted like dust. But his stomach cramped with hunger the moment food hit it. 4 days, maybe 5. He'd lost count of when he'd last eaten a full meal. The willow bark was where he kept it, hanging from a nail in the pantry. He stripped pieces into the pot, watched the water turn amber as it steeped. Fever tea, bitter as sin, but it worked. The cavalry surgeon had shown him how to make it 20 years ago. back when Caleb still believed medicine could save everyone if you just knew enough. He brought it to her in Sarah's china teacup, the only fancy thing in the house, painted with tiny blue flowers. Sarah's mother had given it to her as a wedding gift. He'd never used it. Never had a reason to. It had sat in the cupboard for 8 years, gathering dust while he drank from tin cups because tin cups didn't remind him of anything. The woman took the cup in both hands, stared at it like she was trying to figure out what it meant. "Drink," he said. "It'll help with the fever." She sipped, her face twisted at the bitterness, but she kept drinking, small swallows, until the cup was empty. He took it back, set it on the dresser next to the tintype photograph, the one that lay face down, same as it had for 3 years, same as it would stay. "You got a name?" she asked. First personal question. "Caleb. Caleb Stone." "A nailing. That Apache means someone who heals." Bitter laugh, more breath than sound. Parents had a sense of humor. He left her to sleep. Went to tend the mare, unsaddled her, brushed her down, gave her water and grain. Shadow appeared at his elbow. Leaning against his leg, Caleb's hand dropped to the dog's head, scratched behind his ears. "You did good, boy." Shadow's tail moved. Once, twice. Then the dog's ears swiveled toward the house. Caleb heard it too. Footsteps, uneven, dragging. He found her in the main room, one hand braced against the wall, trying to make it to the door. Her face was gray, sheened with sweat. She'd made it maybe 10 feet from the bed. "Where are you going?" "Away." She took another step, leg nearly buckling, caught herself on the wall. "Shouldn't have come here. Shouldn't have let you bring me." "You got a better option. Die somewhere else. Not get you killed with me." She tried another step. Her leg went out completely. Caleb caught her before she hit the floor, took her weight against his shoulder. She was shaking now, fever and exhaustion, and whatever was driving her to run. "Easy," he said. "You ain't dying, and you ain't going nowhere on that leg." "They'll come here." "Let them come." She pulled back, looked at his face. "You don't know what you're saying?" "Then tell me." Silence. She was calculating something, weighing options she didn't have. Finally, she sagged against him. Let him walk her back to the bed. He eased her down. She lay back on the pillow Sarah had sewn, filled with corn husks, because they couldn't afford down, the same pillow he'd pressed against his face every night for a year after she died, trying to smell something that was already gone. "I need to show you something," she said. He waited. "The case? The leather one?" He'd seen it at the mining shack, still strapped across her body when he found her. He'd carried it back with them, set it by the front door when they arrived. He retrieved it now, brought it to her. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside papers, yellowed with age, creased from folding and refolding. Official-looking documents with seals and signatures. A letter on law office letterhead, and something else, an affidavit, signed and witnessed. "Land grant," she said. 1872, Territorial Governor Morrison, my family's spring, 40 miles south. Last water source for a day's ride in any direction. She pulled out the letter. "My husband fought them in court. Lawyer in Tucson. Case was going to appeal. What happened? Horse accident." Her voice went flat. "Dead?" "Official report. Body had rope marks on the neck, but the sheriff said that was from getting dragged." She looked at him. "Funny thing about rope marks. They look different when a man's dragged versus when he's hung." Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd seen both kinds during the cavalry years. She was right. They took my son, Ashki, 8 years old, Indian school at Fort Apache. Said it was for his own good, his education, but they took him the same week they found my husband's body. Her hands were shaking harder now. Message was clear: fight us. Lose everything. So you ran. So I fought. She held up the affidavit. Surveyor. They said I killed. He didn't die from anything I did. Stampede. Railroad blasting scared the cattle, and they ran. He got caught in it. I tried to pull him clear. He lived long enough to tell Father Marquez what happened. Signed this before he died. And the murder charge came after the surveyor died, after I wouldn't sell the land, after my husband was gone and my son was taken, and I had nothing left to lose. She handed him the document case. Railroad wants that spring. Can't build through 40 miles of desert without water, so they need me quiet. Dead would be easier, but quiet works too. Caleb took the case. The leather was worn smooth where hands had gripped it. Water stain from 3 weeks of hiding. Inside was proof. Legal proof. The kind that should matter. If you keep these, he said, you're part of it. They'll come for you too. He looked at the papers, at the land grant with its official seal, at the affidavit signed by a dying man, at the letter from a lawyer still fighting a case for a dead client. Sarah's voice again. Some things are worth standing for. He crossed to the mantel, set the case next to the harmonica. The harmonica he hadn't touched in 3 years. The one that had dust in the shape of where it used to sit, before he'd moved it. Before he'd started rearranging things to avoid looking at what hurt. You need food, he said. She blinked at the subject change. What? When's the last time you ate something that wasn't at dried meat? I don't... She stopped. Thought. 3 weeks, maybe more. He went to the kitchen, cut cornbread, found the butter in the cold box, poured coffee that had been sitting since morning, bitter and thick, brought it to her on a plate, a tin cup, basic. But it was what he had. She took the plate in both hands, just held it for a moment, staring at the butter melting into the warm bread. Her hands were shaking. You're going to spill that, he said. She looked up at him. When's the last time you ate? The question caught him sideways. He thought back. Yesterday's breakfast, no. Day before, couldn't remember. Before Shadow disappeared. 4 days, maybe. 5. While ago, he said. We're a pair, ain't we? She broke off a piece of cornbread, ate it slow, closed her eyes. This is good. It wasn't. It was hard from sitting out. And he'd never been much of a cook, but she ate it like it was the first real food she'd had in weeks, which it probably was. He stood there, watching, and felt something in his chest crack, not break, just crack, like ice starting to thaw. My wife died, he said. The words came out before he knew he was going to say them. 8 years ago, childbirth, baby too, girl, never drew a breath. Nolan stopped chewing, swallowed. I'm sorry. I ain't told anyone that, not since it happened. Why tell me? Good question. He didn't have a good answer. Just knew that sitting here, watching her eat cornbread in Sarah's bed, felt like something breaking open inside him. Something that needed to break. We both been dead a while, I reckon. he said. She set down the plate, looked at him straight. I'm still fighting. You? Was he? He'd been hiding. 8 years of hiding, of not talking, of counting days and fence posts and ceiling beams because counting meant he didn't have to feel. But Shadow had dragged him out here, into this, into choosing. Getting there, he said. She nodded, picked up the coffee, sipped it, made a face. This is terrible. Yeah. You got sugar. No. Figures. But she kept drinking. Shadow appeared in the doorway, looked at both of them, then lay down, right in the middle of the threshold, body blocking the path between them. Bridge, guard, both. Caleb sat in the chair by the window, the one Sarah used to sit in, mending clothes by lamplight, the one he hadn't sat in since she died because it was hers. He sat in it now. They'll come here, Nalin said again. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. But they'll come. Then we'll deal with it when they do. You don't have to do this. He looked at her, at this woman who'd been running for 3 weeks with a bullet graze in her leg, carrying legal papers that should have protected her but didn't, at her hands wrapped around Sarah's china teacup like it was something precious, at Shadow lying in the doorway, content. Yeah, he said. I do. The words hung there. Truth, plain and simple. He did have to do this, not because of the papers or the law or anything noble, because for the first time in 8 years, he'd spoken to another human being for more than 2 sentences. And it turned out he'd missed it, missed being alive. Outside, the sun touched the horizon. The light coming through the window turned everything. Nalin's eyes were closing again, fever and exhaustion pulling her under. The plate sat empty on her lap. She'd eaten every crumb. Caleb stood, took the plate and cup. Shadow's ears swiveled toward the Badlands. Though the dog didn't move from his post, someone was out there, following her trail. And that trail led here. Caleb woke before dawn, same as always. But this time there was breathing in the other room that wasn't his. Soft, regular, still alive. He dressed quiet, pulled on his boots. Shadow lifted his head from where he'd been sleeping across the bedroom threshold, looked at Caleb, settled back down. Guarding, the root cellar was under the kitchen floorboards, accessed through a trap door he'd built when he first bought the property. Cool down there, dark. He'd stored potatoes and onions through winter, kept the butter from going rancid in summer. He opened it now, looked down into the darkness. Dirt floor, stone walls, no light except what came from above. Nalin, rustling from the bedroom. She appeared in the doorway, one hand on the frame. 3 days since he'd found her. The fever had broken yesterday. She'd tried walking that evening, made it from the bed to the main room before her leg gave out. Better than the day before, when she couldn't stand at all. But not good enough. Good. I need to go into town, he said. Get supplies. She looked at the open trap door. Her face didn't change, but he saw her jaw tighten. Anyone comes while I'm gone, he said. You'll hear them. Horse hooves, wagon wheels. Sound carries out here. You go down, close it behind you. Don't come out unless you hear my voice. What if you don't come back? Then you wait till dark and run. He handed her the Spencer. She took it. Checked the breech automatic loaded now. 5 cartridges from his ammunition box. She'd insisted on loading it herself yesterday. Hands shaking with fever, but steady enough to do it right. Someone had trained her well. "It'll be 6 hours," he said. "3 there, 3 back. What if they follow you?" "They won't know to follow me. Not yet." She descended the ladder one-handed, rifle in the other. He watched her settle into the corner where she could see the trap door. Her face disappeared into shadow, just the whites of her eyes visible. He lowered the door, tested it, flush with the floor. You'd have to know it was there to see it. The ride to town took 3 hours, same as always. But today he counted things different. Not fence posts, not birds on wire. He counted how many places a man could hide along the road. Ravines, rock outcroppings, places where brush grew thick enough to conceal a horse. 17 places. He'd never counted them before. Brennan's General Store sat on the corner of Main and First, 2-story clapboard with a false front painted green. The hitching post out front held 4 horses, more than usual for this early. Caleb tied the mare, studied the horses. 2 he recognized: Jake Clemens' buckskin, Mary Harding's old gray. 2 he didn't: bays, well-fed, saddles with silver conchos, railroad issue. His chest tightened. He loosened the tie on his holster. Didn't draw. Just made sure it was loose. The bell over the door rang when he entered. Conversation stopped. 4 men stood at the counter. Jake and Mary turned, nodded. The other 2 railroad men had to be kept talking to Tom Brennan like Caleb hadn't entered. "Seen her come through here?" the taller one asked. 40, maybe, thick through the shoulders. Voice used to give in orders. "Apache woman, 30, maybe 35, injured. Might have asked for supplies." Tom shook his head. "Ain't seen nobody like that." "You sure railroad's offering $50 for information leading to her whereabouts?" $50. 3 months' wages for most men. Enough to make people remember things they hadn't seen. Tom's eyes flicked to Caleb, back to the railroad man. "I'm sure." The shorter railroad man turned now, looked at Caleb. "You seen anybody like that?" "Nope. You live out east, don't you, Stone?" "That's right." "Alone. Me and my dog." The man studied him. Caleb held his gaze. Didn't blink. Didn't look away. "Cavalry taught you that stare down trouble or it runs you over." "Heard you bought supplies last week," the man said. "More than usual for 1 man." Tom coughed. "Now, I don't recall." "I'm asking him." The man stepped closer. Caleb could smell tobacco on his breath, whiskey underneath. "That true, dog eats a lot," Caleb said. The man's eyes narrowed. "Must be a big dog." "Big enough." Silence stretched. The man opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his partner. Some signal passed between them. The taller one pulled a paper from his vest pocket, unfolded it on the counter. "This is her," he said. "Wanted for murder. Killed a railroad surveyor 2 weeks back. Shot him while he was measuring right of way." Caleb looked at the poster. Charcoal drawing. The face was wrong. Nose too wide, chin too sharp. But the eyes were right. Dark, unflinching, armed and dangerous. The tall man continued. "She's Apache, so she knows the territory. Could be anywhere. But she's wounded, shot in the leg during her escape. She'll need help. Medical attention, food, water. If you see her," the short man added, looking directly at Caleb. "You let us know. Don't try to handle it yourself, or she's killed once. Won't hesitate to kill again." Caleb picked up the poster, studied it. Let them see him studying it. I'll keep an eye out. He handed it back. The man didn't take it, just left it sitting on the counter between them. You do that, he said. Caleb turned to Tom. Need rice and kulpak. Ammunition for a Winchester. Tom moved slow, gathering items. The railroad men didn't leave, just stood there, watching. Jake and Mary made excuses, left. The bell rang twice, and Tom set the supplies on the counter. His hands shook slightly as he tallied the cost. $2.15. Caleb paid. Tom's eyes met his for a second, flicked away. Message received. Be careful. One more thing, Caleb said. You got any carbolic acid? Tom froze. That for your dog, too. Fence cut my hand 3 days back, getting infected. But a plausible one. Tom nodded slow, got the bottle from the medicine shelf, added it to the parcel. Caleb took the supplies, turned to leave. The short railroad man stepped into his path. Stone, was it? That's right. You were cavalry. I can tell by how you stand. Long time ago. Apache campaigns. Some. Then you know what they're like. Can't trust them. This woman, he tapped the poster, she's dangerous. You try to help her. You're making yourself an accessory to murder. Caleb shifted the parcel under his arm. Appreciate the warning. Not a warning. A promise. Railroad looks after its interests. Anyone gets in the way. He left it hanging. Didn't need to finish. Caleb walked past him. The man didn't stop him. But Caleb felt eyes on his back all the way to the door. Outside. He tied the parcel to his saddle. His hands were steady, but his jaw ached from clenching. He forced himself to relax. Swung up onto the mare. Didn't look back at the store. Just turned north and rode. A mile out. He let himself check behind, no one following. Yet. 2 miles out. He saw the smoke. 3 columns. Thin, rising from different points in the hills. Not chimney smoke, this was signal smoke. Short burst, like code, but the pattern was wrong. Apache used specific sequences, passed down through generations. This was improvised. White men pretending. He counted the positions. North, east, south. They were triangulating, coordinating a search pattern. And the triangle's center was somewhere between here and his property. His property. He touched heels to the mare, pushed her faster. Not a run that would attract attention, but a steady canter that ate up miles. Shadow could handle the pace. The dog loped alongside, tongue out, keeping up. The sun climbed higher. Sweat soaked through his shirt. He didn't slow. The ranch appeared over the rise. No smoke, no horses at the rail. Door closed, same as he'd left it. But the back of his neck prickled. Something felt wrong. He dismounted at the porch, left the mare tied, drew the Winchester before opening the door. Stupid to walk into your own house armed, but he did it anyway. Empty. Nalin. No answer. His chest went tight. He crossed to the kitchen, found the trap door, still closed. He listened, heard breathing below. It's me. Caleb. The door lifted. She came up the ladder slow, rifle first, then her head. Her face was gray, sheened with sweat. 6 hours in the root cellar, dark and cool. Waiting. She was shaking. Anyone come? He asked. No. He helped her up, felt her weight against him. She'd been sitting in the dark for 6 hours, injured leg cramping. waiting to hear hoofbeats that meant she had to choose between hiding or fighting. He walked her to the chair, sat her down, brought water. She drank it in 3 long pulls, handed back the cup. Her hand steadied. What happened in town? He told her. The railroad men. The poster. The question about supplies. The smoke signals on the way back. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she set down the cup, stood. Her legs held this time. Barely, but they held. I'm leaving tonight, she said. You can barely stand. I'll be standing well enough by dark. Where you gonna go? Away from here. Away from you. She moved toward the bedroom, started gathering the few things she had. The flour sack. The blanket. Shouldn't have stayed. Knew better. Now they're asking about you. Watching you. I waited too long. You waited because you couldn't walk. And now you're involved. That clerk Tom, he covered for you. But those men aren't stupid. They'll figure it out. Watch your property. Then we're both dead. She stopped, faced him. Or you can turn me in. Collect the $50. Tell them I forced you to help. Threatened you with the rifle. They'll believe that. You get paid. I get caught. Everyone's happy. You think I'd do that? I think you should smart play, safe play. He thought about that. About $50. About safety. About going back to counting ceiling beams and fence posts and days without speaking. Back to being dead. No, he said. Why not? Because... He stopped. Didn't have words for it. Just knew that turning her in meant going back. And he couldn't go back. Not anymore. She stared at him. You're a fool. Probably. They'll come here. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tonight. Let them come. You keep saying that. You don't know what you're saying. Then tell me what I'm saying. She sat down hard. Leg had given out again. She didn't try to hide it this time. Just sat there, breathing heavy, looking at him with those dark eyes. You're saying you'll die for someone you don't even know. I'm saying I'm tired of hiding. The words hung between them. Truth. Raw and simple. Outside. Shadow barked. Not his usual bark. Higher pitched. Warning. Caleb moved to the window. A rider was coming up the road. Alone. Moving slow. He recognized the horse before the rider, Sheriff Hackett's roan. Get in the cellar, Caleb said. He's seen the smoke from your chimney. Knows someone's here. Then stay in the bedroom. Don't come out. She grabbed the Spencer, disappeared through the tenor. Shadow was at the window now, watching the rider approach. His hackles weren't up. That was something. Caleb opened the door, stepped onto the porch, waited. Sheriff Hackett reined in at the property line, didn't cross, just sat his horse, looking at Caleb across 20 feet of yard. Cal, he said. Sheriff? Long silence. Hackett was 50-something, gray in his beard, lines around his eyes from squinting into sun. They'd served together, years back. Different company, same campaign. Hackett had been a sergeant then. Good man, fair man. Heard you had visitors at Brennan's store, Hackett said. 2 railroad men, asking questions. They ask about you. Some, Hackett nodded, looked at the house, at the chimney, back at Caleb. You provisioned for 2 these days. Dog eats a lot. That's what you told them. I heard. Hackett shifted in his saddle. Cal, I'm going to be straight with you. Those men, they're Pinkerton agents. Railroad hired them to find this woman. They got legal authority, badges from the territorial governor, and they're mean. The kind of mean that doesn't care about who gets hurt. Appreciate the warning. It's not a warning, it's a fact. Hackett leaned forward, leather creaking. You were a good soldier. Stone. Saw you hold the line at Adobe Wells when smarter men ran. You got courage, but courage without sense is just another way to die young. I'm 47. Don't think that counts as young. You know what I mean. Hackett straightened. They'll come here. Maybe 20 men. Some of them itching for a fight. You can't win that. Ain't looking for a fight. Don't matter what you're looking for. They'll bring it anyway. Caleb said nothing. Hackett waited. When no answer came, he sighed. When they come, Hackett said, I can't help you. My hands are tied. They got legal papers, proper authority. All I can do is keep it from turning into a bloodbath. But I can't stop them. You understand? I understand. Do you? Hackett's voice went hard. Because if you're hiding that woman, you're breaking territorial law. That makes you a criminal. And I'll have to bring you in too. If I was hiding someone, Caleb said carefully. Wouldn't be smart to admit it. Hackett stared at him. Something passed across his face, respect. Maybe, or regret. You always were stubborn. Sarah used to joke about it. Said moving you was like moving a mountain. The name hit Caleb like a fist. Sarah. Hackett had known her. Had come to the funeral 8 years ago. Stood in the rain while they lowered 2 coffins into the ground. She'd be proud, Hackett said quietly. Or she'd be furious. Hard to say with Sarah. He turned his horse. Sheriff, Caleb called. Hackett looked back. How long do I have? Tomorrow, and maybe the day after. They're waiting for the more men from Tucson. When they come, he didn't finish. Didn't need to. He rode off. Caleb watched until he disappeared over the rise. Then he went inside, closed the door, locked it. First time he'd locked his own door in 8 years. Nalin emerged from the bedroom. He's your friend. Used to be. He's warning you. I know. And you're still not turning me in. Caleb crossed to the mantel, looked at the document case sitting next to the harmonica, at the proof inside it, at the land grant, and the affidavit, and the letter from a lawyer who was still fighting for a dead man. No, he said. I'm not. She limped over, stood beside him. Why? He picked up the harmonica. Dust came off on his fingers. He'd bought it for Sarah 20 years ago, before they were married. She'd wanted him to learn to play, said music made a house feel like a home. He'd tried, learned 3 songs before she died, hadn't touched it since. Because, he said slowly, I got tired of being dead. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out, took the harmonica from his hand, studied it, handed it back. Then I guess we're both about to find out if being alive is worth dying for, she said. The sun touched the horizon, bleeding red across the Badlands. Caleb stood on the porch, watching dust settle where Hackett had ridden off. One day, maybe less. 20 men with rifles and legal papers, and the kind of righteous anger that came from believing the law was on your side. He went inside. Nalin was at the table, the Spencer across her lap. She looked up. What did he say? Tomorrow, maybe the day after. He pulled out the chair across from her. Sat. They're bringing more men from Tucson. Pinkerton agents. Railroad muscle. How many, Si? 20? He said. She was quiet. Then she stood, tested her weight on the injured leg. It held, better than yesterday, better than the day before. Still not right. He could see her favorite, see the tremor in her thigh when she put full weight down. I'm leaving tonight, she said. You'll give me supplies, water, ammunition. I'll head west, toward the territorial line. 3 days hard riding if I don't stop. You can't ride 3 days. You can barely stand. I'll manage. You'll die. Better than dragging you down with me. She moved to the bedroom, started gathering what little she had. The flour sack, the blanket. You helped me, gave me time to heal. That's more than I had a right to ask. But I'm not staying here and watching you die for me. I ain't dying for you, Ilya. She stopped, turned. Then what are you dying for? The question sat between them like a stone. He didn't have an answer. Not one that made sense. Just knew that the thought of going back to how things were, alone, silent, counting days felt worse than whatever was coming tomorrow. I'm tired, he said finally. Tired of being a coward. Coward. Her voice went sharp. You pulled me out of that shack, patched my leg, hid me from railroad men who'd hang you just for knowing my name. That's not cowardice. I ain't talking about you. He stood, paced to the window, stared out at nothing. I'm talking about 8 years of hiding, of not talking because talking meant feeling something, of letting my wife die and deciding the best thing I could do was die with her. Just slower. Your wife died in childbirth. You couldn't stop that? No, but I could have kept living after. He turned to face her. She used to say some things were worth standing for. I always had an excuse. Too dangerous. Too risky. What if we lose everything? So we did nothing, stayed quiet, kept our heads down. His throat tightened. And then she died anyway, and I've been doing the same thing ever since. Nothing. Quiet. Head down. The shame of it hit him then. 8 years of wasted life. 8 years of counting ceiling beams while the world moved on without him. 8 years of being too much of a coward to even try. Nalin limped back to the table. Sat. Her hands were shaking. Not from fever. From something else. My husband stood for something, she said, voice raw. He fought them in court. Used the law. Did everything right. They killed him for it. Hung him from a tree and called it a horse accident. Then they took my son, 8 years old, ripped him out of my arms and sent him to a school where they cut his hair and beat him for speaking our language. Her voice cracked. Standing for something got him killed. Got my son stolen. Got me running through the desert with a hole in my leg. You still fighting, though, because I got no choice left. Maybe I don't either. She looked at him. You got every choice. You can tell me to leave. You can turn me in. You can ride to town tomorrow and tell them you just found out I was here, that you're loyal to the railroad and the law and everything decent. They'd believe you. You'd be a hero. And go back to counting ceiling beams. You'd be alive. That ain't the same thing. Silence fell between them. Outside, Shadow barked once, just once, then quiet. Nalin stood again, slower this time. What's her name? Your wife. Sarah? She'd be proud of you. He shook his head. She'd say I'm 8 years too late. That helping you doesn't make up for not helping that Navajo family. Or the Mexican farmer they ran off his land. Or any of the other times I could have stood up and didn't. It's a start, though. Maybe. He moved to the window, checked the horizon. Nothing but darkness now. Stars beginning to show. Or maybe it's just me finally running out of places to hide. She was quiet for a long moment. Then run where they'll find me. Then your help meant nothing. But if I stay, we both hang. Then we make it mean something. How? He didn't answer. Didn't have one. Just knew that running wasn't an option anymore. For either of them. They worked through the evening like soldiers, inventory first. Food, cornbread, dried meat, the rice he'd bought in town. Enough for 3 days if they rationed. Ammunition, he had 50 rounds for the Winchester, 30 for his Colt revolver. She had 5 cartridges for the Spencer. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Water. 2 canteens. Both full. The well was 30 feet from the house. Exposed. If they got pinned inside, they'd have what they had and nothing more. Sight lines. The front door faced east, toward the road. 2 windows, one in the bedroom facing south, one in the main room facing west. The back wall was solid. No windows. Good for defense. Bad if they needed to run. Escape route. Through the bedroom window, across the yard to the canyon. From there, north through the rocks. Then west toward disputed territory. Risky. But everything was risky now. They worked in silence. Not uncomfortable silence. Soldier's silence. The kind where words weren't needed because the work said everything. Shadow paced between them, whining low in his throat. He knew, dogs always knew when something bad was coming. Caleb found himself at the mantel, staring at the document case, at the land grant inside, at the proof that should matter but didn't. Not to men with rifles and railroad money. He reached under his shirt, pulled out the leather cord. The wedding ring swung free, catching lamplight. He lifted it over his head, set it on the mantel next to the case. "What are you doing?" Nalin asked. "She's part of this now, too." He looked at the ring, at the worn gold band Sarah had slipped on his finger 20 years ago. She wanted me to stand for something. Guess I'm finally listening. Nalin moved beside him, reached past the ring to pick up the harmonica. Dust came off on her fingers. "What did you used to play? Anything that wasn't sad. Play something now." She held it out to him. Might not get another chance. His hand closed around it. Cold metal, smooth from handling. Sarah's hands had touched this. Her breath had moved through it. The last time he'd played was the night before she went into labor. She'd asked him to play Red River Valley, said it reminded her of home. He lifted it to his lips, drew breath, played 3 notes. The sound broke something open inside his chest, sharp and clean like a knife cutting through scar tissue. He stopped, lowered the harmonica. Couldn't continue. Couldn't breathe past the grief that rose up sudden and fierce and shameful. 8 years of running from this, of being too weak to face it. Shadow howled, low and mournful, the sound carrying through the house and out into the night. Grief acknowledged, grief given voice. Caleb's hands were shaking. He set the harmonica back on the mantel, next to the ring and the document case. 3 things. Past, present, future, all sitting together in the lamplight. I can't, he said, voice breaking. You did, Nayland said quietly. 3 notes. That's 3 more than you played yesterday. He nodded. Couldn't speak past the tightness in his throat. The shame of it, that it had taken this long, that he'd needed a stranger and a dog and the threat of death to finally play 3 notes. They finished preparing in silence. Checked the rifle loads, made sure the ammunition was accessible, set buckets of water near the windows in case of fire, did all the things soldiers did when they knew morning would bring violence. Near midnight, they sat at the table. Caleb had made coffee, bitter and strong. Nayland drank it without complaint. Shadow lay between them, head on his paws. Tell me about your son, Caleb said. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then Ashkey means boy in our language. His father was Navajo, so we used both names, Apache and Navajo. Thought it would make him strong. Instead, it just made him a target. She stared into her coffee. He's 8 now, at Fort Apache School. They cut his hair first day, shaved it to the scalp, beat him when he cried, told him his name was Thomas now, that Ashkey was a savage name. He'll remember his real name. Will he? She looked up. Her face was raw with something worse than grief. Shame. The deep kind that came from failing the person who mattered most. By the time I get him back, if I get him back, he'll have forgotten. They'll have beaten it out of him, beaten our language, our ways, everything that makes him who he is. And I couldn't stop them. I ran instead, hid in the desert like a coward, while my son forgot his own name. Her voice broke. Caleb saw tears on her face, the first he'd seen since finding her. Not sad tears, ashamed tears, the kind that came from knowing you'd done the only thing you could, and it still wasn't enough. You ain't a coward, he said. Then what am I? Her voice went raw. A mother who lost her son, a wife who couldn't save her husband, a woman who ran and hid and let good people like you risk everything for her. She wiped her face, angry at the tears, at these. What kind of person does that make me human? She laughed. Bitter sound. That's supposed to make me feel better. No, just true. They sat in silence. The coffee went cold. Shadow slept. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to what morning would bring. Near dawn, Nayland stood, limped to the window, looked out at the gray light spreading across the Badlands. They'll come at sunrise, she said. Want us to see them coming. Want us to be afraid. You afraid. Terrified. She turned to face him. He thought about that. About the 20 men who would ride up his property line in a few hours, about the rifles and the legal papers, and the kind of justice that came from money and power, about dying on his own land for a woman he'd known less than a week. Yeah, he said. I'm afraid. Good. She moved back to the table, picked up the Spencer, checked the load again. Her hands were steadier now. Fear keeps you alive, makes you careful, or gets you killed. That too. The gray light turned pink. Dawn coming. Caleb stood, stretched. His back ached from sitting all night. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. His hands were steady, though. That was something. He moved to the window, looked east toward the road. Nothing yet, but they'd come. Hackett had said tomorrow, and tomorrow was here. Shadow raised his head, ears forward, alert. Then Caleb heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Hoofbeats, multiple horses, moving at a walk, not hurrying, not trying to hide, coming straight up the road like they owned it, because they did. The law gave them that right. Papers and badges and the full weight of the railroad behind them. Nalin heard it too. She stood, moved to the door, a rifle ready but not raised. How many? Caleb counted the rhythm of the hoofbeats, tried to separate individual horses from the group's sound. Hard to tell at this distance, but more than 5, fewer than 20. 10, he said. Maybe 12. They brought friends. Looks like. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. Shadow growled, low and continuous. Warning. Caleb picked up his Winchester, checked the load. 11 rounds. He had 30 more in his belt. Nalin had 5 in the Spencer. 16 rounds total against however many men were coming. The math was bad. The hoofbeats stopped. Caleb moved to the window, kept himself back from the glass. Out of easy rifle shot. 5 riders at the property line. Not 12, 5. They sat their horses, waiting, making him come to them. He recognized 3, the 2 Pinkerton agents from the store, and Sheriff Hackett, sitting his roan off to one side, hand resting on his thigh near his sidearm, but not touching it. The other 2 were younger, harder, railroad muscle, the kind hired for violence, not thinking. The tall Pinkerton Mercer, Hackett had called him, raised his hand, not a wave, a signal, called out across the yard, "Stone, we know you got the woman. Send her out. No trouble for you." Caleb's hands tightened on the Winchester. He'd known this moment was coming, had prepared for it all night. But knowing and facing were different things. Nalin stood behind him. "What do you want to do?" He looked at her. At this woman who'd been running for 3 weeks, who'd lost her husband and son, who'd chosen to fight instead of surrender even when fighting meant dying. Then he looked at the 5 men waiting at his property line, at their rifles and their legal papers, and their absolute certainty that they were right. He thought about Sarah, about standing for something, about 8 years of hiding, about 3 notes on a harmonica he couldn't finish playing, about shame and cowardice, and all the ways a man could die while still breathing. "I'll talk to them," he said. "They're not here to talk." "I know." He moved to the door, hand on the latch. Nalin grabbed his arm. "Don't go out there," she said. "They'll kill you. Maybe." He looked down at her hand on his arm. First time she'd touched him intentionally. "But they ain't getting you without talking to me first." He opened the door, stepped onto the porch, alone, left the Winchester propped against the doorframe, visible but not threatening. Mercer watched him come. The other men shifted in their saddles, hands near their weapons. Sheriff Hackett sat still, face unreadable. Caleb walked down the steps, across the yard, stopped at the property line, 20 feet between him and the riders, close enough to talk, far enough to run if shooting started. "Morning," he said. Mercer didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You're harboring a fugitive. Federal crime. Step aside and let us search your property." "You got a warrant." Mercer pulled a paper from his vest, held it up. Official seal, territorial judge's signature, legal, proper. Everything by the book. "Right here. Signed yesterday by Judge Willoughby." Caleb read what he could see from this distance. Search warrant for his property, authorized by territorial court. That woman killed a man, Mercer continued. Railroad surveyor shot him while he was working. Left him to die. She's dangerous, armed. We have legal authority to bring her in. She says different. Mercer's eyes narrowed. So she is here. Caleb didn't answer. Didn't need to. His silence confirmed it. Then you're making yourself an accessory to murder, Mercer said, voice flat, professional. Territorial law? You know what that means. I know what it means. Then step aside. Let us do our job. You walk away from this clean. She's got papers, land grant, legal right to that water. Also got an affidavit from the surveyor before he died. Says he was trampled in a stampede. Says she tried to save him. A murder charge is false. Mercer's face went hard. Papers don't mean anything, not when there's a dead man and a wanted criminal. They will when Circuit Judge Willoughby gets here for the fall session. Federal court. This becomes a territorial case instead of just railroad business. Judge might have questions about why you're hunting a woman with federal land rights. By then, she'll have killed someone else. Maybe you... We're not waiting. Then you're going to have to go through me. The words hung in the morning air. Final. No taking them back. One of the younger men, couldn't have been more than 25, spoke up. We got a warrant. We don't need permission. His hand moved toward his rifle. Hackett's hand dropped to his sidearm, stopping him. Nobody draws. That's an order. Mercer studied Caleb, calculating something. Last chance. Stone, step aside or we'll move you aside. Caleb stood his ground, felt his heart hammering in his chest, felt sweat running down his back despite the cool morning air, felt every instinct screaming at him to run, to hide, to do what he'd done for 8 years. Instead he said no. Mercer's jaw tightened. He looked at the other men. Take him! 2 men dismounted, started forward. Caleb didn't move, didn't raise the Winchester he'd left on the porch, just stood there as they crossed his property line, boots crunching on gravel. He heard the door open behind him. Nalin's voice, Stop. Everyone froze. She stood on the porch, Spencer rifle raised, aimed at Mercer. Her hands were steady. Her voice was steady. Everything about her was steady except the slight tremor in her injured leg that only someone looking close would see. You want him, she said. You go through me first. Mercer's hand moved to his rifle. The 2 men who'd been walking toward Caleb stopped, turned. Everyone stared at Nalin on the porch. Spencer aimed steady despite the distance, 40 feet. Maybe. Not an easy shot. But not impossible either. Not with a Spencer. Lower the rifle, Mercer said. Voice calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that came before violence. You're outnumbered. Outgunned. This doesn't end well for you. Doesn't end well for you either, Nalin said. I got 1 shot. I'm taking you with me. Mercer's jaw tightened. Caleb could see the calculation running behind his eyes. 1 shot from a Spencer would punch a hole through a man's chest big enough to put your fist through. Range was maybe 40 feet. She wouldn't miss. But the moment she fired, the other 4 men would cut her down. Then Caleb. Math was simple. Brutal, but simple. This is federal business, Mercer said. You're interfering with a lawful warrant. Then come get it. Her finger moved to the trigger. The 2 railroad men shifted, hands on their weapons. Hackett raised his hand higher, voice sharp. Nobody draws. I said that's an order. The younger man who'd spoken earlier said, "Sheriff, we got the law on our side. Law doesn't stop bullets, son." Caleb felt the moment crystallizing, hardening into something that couldn't be walked back. Someone was going to make a move. Man was going to get killed. Once the shooting started, it wouldn't stop until everyone was dead or bleeding. His mouth opened. Words came out before his brain caught up. "She's got papers." Everyone looked at him. "Legal papers," he continued. "Land grant from Territorial Governor Morrison, 1872. Water rights recorded proper with the Territorial Office. And an affidavit from the surveyor, the one you say she killed, Thomas Fletcher, signed before he died. Witnessed by Father Marquez from San Xavier Mission in Tucson." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "You're lying. She's got them in the house. Document case. Legal proof she didn't kill that man. That the railroad's murder charges are false. That this warrant is based on fabricated evidence. Papers can be forged. Not with a territorial seal, and not with a Catholic priest's signature. You want to call a priest a liar in front of a federal judge? Be my guest. But that's going to look real interesting when this goes to court." Silence. Mercer's horse shifted under him, sensing tension. The animal's ears were flat, whites of its eyes showing. "Show me," Mercer said. "Lower your weapons first." "Not a chance." Caleb turned, looked at Nylon. She was shaking now, not from fever, but from holding the rifle aimed for so long. Her injured leg wouldn't hold much longer. He could see it in the way she'd shifted her weight, leaning against the doorframe for support. "Show them the papers," he said. "They'll take them. Destroy them. They'll take them anyway if you shoot Mercer. And then we're all dead." Her eyes met his, dark and fierce and desperate. She knew he was right, hated that he was right, but knew it. "Come with me," she said to Caleb. Not trusting, needing witness, he walked back to the porch, slow, hands visible, not threatening. The two railroad men watched him pass, hands still on their weapons. He climbed the steps, stood beside Nalin. Her hands were shaking hard now, muscles screaming from holding the rifle steady. He touched her shoulder once. She lowered the Spencer. They went inside, through the window. He could see the men hadn't moved, still mounted, still watching, waiting. Nalin retrieved the document case from the mantel, handed it to him. Her hands were trembling too much to open it. He unbuckled the straps, lifted the lid. The papers inside were yellowed, creased from folding, but the seal was clear. Territorial Governor's Office. Official. "You sure about this?" she asked. "No." "Then why?" "Because talking's better than dying, and those papers are the only thing keeping you alive right now." They walked back out together, Caleb carrying the case, Nylon limping beside him, Spencer in one hand, using his shoulder for support with the other. Shadow followed, positioned himself between them and the mounted men. Hackles up. "Ready?" Caleb stopped at the property line, opened the case. "Land grant, signed by Governor Morrison, July 1872. Water rights to the spring 40 miles south of here, recorded with the Territorial Land Office." He held up the first document. Morning sun was behind him, making the paper hard to read. Deliberate. He'd learned that trick in the cavalry, never let them read orders clear until you were ready. "That could be anything," Mercer said. Caleb pulled out the second document. "Affidavit, signed by Thomas Fletcher, railroad surveyor, dated 14 days ago, witnessed by Father Marquez, San Xavier Mission." He read from it, voice carrying across the yard. "I, Thomas Fletcher, being of sound mind, though injured in body, do hereby state that on this date I was involved in a cattle stampede caused by railroad blasting operations. The Apache woman, known as Nalian, attempted to render aid and pull me clear of the herd. She did not cause my injuries. She tried to save my life. This statement made freely and without coercion in the presence of Father Marquez. Silence. Mercer's face had gone hard as stone. He died 2 days after signing that. Caleb continued. Catholic priest as witness. You want to call a priest a liar? You're welcome to try. But Judge Willoughby's going to have questions. So's the territorial governor. So's anyone who looks at this case and sees the railroad tried to hang a woman for a crime that didn't happen so they could steal federal land. Federal land! Mercer's voice went flat. Land grants are federal jurisdiction. So's making false murder charges to steal federal property. Judge Willoughby's due here in October for the fall circuit. You think he won't be interested in why the railroad's hunting a woman with federal land rights, why Pinkerton agents are threatening witnesses, why you're trying to circumvent territorial law? Mercer dismounted. The other men tensed. Hackett's hand moved back to his sidearm, rested there. Not drawing. Warning. Mercer walked forward slow, stopped 3 feet from Caleb, close enough to see the documents clear, far enough that drawing wouldn't help him if shooting started. Let me see those. You can see them from there. I need to verify the seal. Caleb held up the land grant, tilted it so the wax seal caught the light. Clear as day. Territorial Governor's Office, 1872. Legitimate, no question. Mercer stared at it. His jaw worked, grinding teeth. Caleb could see the calculation happening, same as before, but different now. Before. It was simple wanted woman. Legal warrant. Bring her in. Now it was complicated. Federal land, priest testimony, dying man's affidavit, federal court, questions from territorial government, newspaper attention. The railroad didn't want that kind of attention. This doesn't change anything, Mercer said, but his voice had lost its certainty. We still have a warrant, signed by a territorial judge. Same judge who'll hear the case in October, Caleb said. You think he's going to be happy you made him sign a warrant based on false charges. You think the railroad wants him looking too close at how you do business. Mercer's hand moved to his vest, pulled out the wanted poster, held it up. This says murder. This says armed and dangerous. This is signed by Territorial Judge Willoughby himself. And when he sees that affidavit, he's going to have questions about who fed him false information. Nalin stepped forward. Her leg buckled slightly, but she caught herself, stayed upright. My son's at Fort Apache Indian School, Fort Apache Army jurisdiction. I sent copies of these documents to the fort superintendent last week, also to my lawyer in Tucson, also to Father Marquez. If I disappear, if anything happens to me, those copies go straight to the territorial governor's office in Santa Fe. Then the Bureau of Indian Affairs gets involved, then the Army, then Congress. She looked at Mercer straight. You want a congressional inquiry into railroad land practices. You want the Army investigating forced enrollment at Indian schools. You want newspapers from San Francisco to Washington asking why Pinkerton agents are hunting women with federal land rights. Mercer's face went pale, not from fear, from rage. Caleb could see it building, see the man fighting the urge to just draw and shoot and deal with the consequences later. That's what the young railroad men were for, the muscle that didn't think, just acted. But Mercer was thinking. That was the difference between a Pinkerton agent and a thug. Pinkertons got paid to think, to calculate, to make the smart play. And the smart play here was walking away. For now. "We'll be back," Mercer said, voice tight, controlled. "With a court order, with proper legal authority that addresses these claims. And when we come back, Stone, you're going to wish you'd cooperated today. Then I'll see you in court." Mercer held his eyes for a long moment. Then he turned, walked back to his horse, swung up into the saddle, looked at his men. "Let's go." The younger railroad man, the one who'd wanted to draw earlier, said, "We're just leaving. We got her right here. We got the law. I said, let's go." Mercer's voice cut like a blade. "That's an order. But that's an order. Johnson." The man's jaw clenched. But he turned his horse. The other railroad man did the same. Hackett sat his roan, watching, making sure no one did something stupid. No one did. Mercer pulled his horse around, started back toward the road. The others followed. 5 horses, 5 men, moving away at a walk, not hurrying, not running, just leaving. But it wasn't over. Caleb could see it in the set of Mercer's shoulders, in the way he set his saddle. They'd be back, with lawyers, with court orders that couldn't be fought, with affidavits and priest testimony, with ways to make this legal. Caleb watched them go, didn't move, didn't lower his guard. Not until they crested the rise and disappeared from view. Even then he waited, listening for hoofbeats coming back. They didn't come back. Nolan's leg gave out. She collapsed, caught herself on Caleb's shoulder. He took her weight, walked her back to the porch. She sat down hard on the steps. Spencer across her lap. Her hands were shaking so bad she couldn't hold the rifle steady. "They're gone," she said, voice hollow, like she couldn't believe it. "For now, they'll come back. Probably. With more men, and with better lawyers, with court orders that can't be fought. Probably." She looked up at him. "Then what did we just win? Time." He sat beside her, felt the wood settle under his weight. Shadow came over, laid his head on Caleb's knee. "We won time. Time for your lawyer to file appeals. Time for the judge to see those documents before the railroad spins their version. Time for people to start asking questions the railroad doesn't want asked. Time." She laughed. Bitter sound. "I've been running for 3 weeks. Seems like all I got is time and proof. That's more than you had when I found you." She was quiet. Then, "Why didn't they just take the papers? They had guns. They had numbers. They could have just shot us and taken everything. Because Hackett was there. And Hackett's a good man. He wouldn't let them murder us in cold blood. Not without making them answer for it." Caleb looked toward the road, where dust was still settling. "And because Mercer's smut, he knows killing us makes this bigger, makes it federal, makes it the kind of thing newspapers write about, and Congress investigates. Railroad doesn't want that attention. Easier to fight it legal, make it look proper. So they'll do it legal. They'll try. And if we lose in court, then we lose. But at least we fought." She turned that over. "Is that enough fighting and losing?" He thought about Sarah. About 8 years of not fighting at all. About 3 notes on a harmonica he still couldn't finish. About standing on his porch this morning, choosing to step into trouble instead of hiding from it. "It's more than nothing," he said. They sat there in silence. The sun climbed higher, The morning warmed, Shadow dozed at their feet, content for now. 2 hours later, hoofbeats again. Caleb's hand went to his rifle, but Shadow wasn't alarmed. The dog's tail wagged. A rider appeared over the rise, alone, wearing a priest's collar. He reined in at the property line, hands raised showing he was unarmed. Caleb Stone. That's me. I'm Father Marquez, San Xavier Mission. He dismounted, walked forward slow. Sheriff Hackett stopped at the mission yesterday evening. Told me what was happening here. Said you might need a witness. Said you had my signature on an affidavit that could save a woman's life. Caleb and Nayland exchanged glances. Hackett had sent word yesterday, before the confrontation, making sure they'd have help if they survived. Father Marquez reached the porch, looked at Nayland, recognition crossed his face. You're her? The woman whose husband they killed. You knew my husband. I presided at his funeral. I witnessed Thomas Fletcher's dying statement. His face hardened. And I'll testify to both when this goes to court. If you'll have me. Nayland's hands started shaking again, not from fear this time, from something else. Relief, maybe, or hope, or just the shock of someone showing up to help without being asked. Why she asked, voice breaking. Why would you do that? Father Marquez looked at her straight. Because it's right. And because I'm tired of watching the railroad destroy people in the name of progress. He turned to Caleb. Sheriff says they'll be back. With lawyers, with court orders. You've got proof, legal proof. You've got a priest willing to testify. You've got time before the circuit judge arrives. Question is, what are you going to do with it? Caleb looked at Nayland, at her torn dress, and her healing leg, and her hands shaking on the rifle. At this woman who'd lost everything and kept fighting anyway. Then he looked south, toward the Badlands, toward the disputed territory where scouts were probably still watching, waiting to report back to Mercer. The smart play was giving up now, settling, taking whatever deal the railroad offered before this got worse. But he'd spent 8 years making the smart play, and it had gotten him nothing but an empty house and a harmonica he couldn't play. We fight, he said. We take it to court. We make them prove their case in front of a judge and jury, and we don't stop until they can't ignore us anymore. Father Marquez nodded. Then you'll need help. I know your lawyer, Benjamin Carlisle, in Tucson. He'll need updated documentation, copies of everything, witnesses willing to testify. He's got me, Caleb said. And me, Father Marquez added. They stood there on the porch, 3 people against the railroad company, against territorial power, against the kind of money that crushed people without thinking twice. It was foolish. Probably going to fail. But it was something. Shadow barked. Different bark this time. Not warning. Something else. Caleb looked where the dog was pointing. Toward the road, more riders appearing over the rise. His stomach dropped. 3 months passed like water wearing stone, slow, steady, changing things you couldn't see until you looked back and realized nothing was the same. Caleb stood at the fence line, wire cutters in hand, mending the same section he'd been working the day Shadow disappeared. Felt like years ago, was only 3 months. The wire twisted under his fingers, muscle memory from decades of this work, but different now. Before, he'd worked in silence, counting the twists because counting meant not thinking. Now Nayland was on the porch, shelling peas into a bowl, the sound of the pods cracking open carried across the yard. Small sound, ordinary, but it filled something in him that had been empty for 8 years. Shadow lay in the shade between them, gray showing around his muzzle, getting old, but content, not watching for danger anymore, just watching. Caleb twisted the wire tight, tested it, held, good enough. He gathered his tools, started back toward the house. His boots raised dust with each step. The garden plot Naline had planted 6 weeks ago was showing green now: peas, beans, corn starting to tassel, things that took time to grow, things that meant staying. She looked up when he reached the porch. Her leg had healed enough to walk. Though she still favored it slightly, would always favor it. Probably. The infection had done damage that carbolic acid couldn't undo. But she could walk, could work. That was enough. How many, he asked, nodding at the bowl. Enough for supper. Maybe extra. She cracked another pod, ran her thumb down the inside. 6 peas dropped into the bowl. Mrs. Caldwell brought seeds last week, said her garden had more than she could use. Mrs. Caldwell's, the neighbor who'd avoided his property for 8 years. Now she came by twice a week, bringing supplies, gossip, company. The town had shifted somehow. People spoke when he rode through, asked questions, expected answers. He was getting used to it. Slowly. He sat on the steps beside her. She handed him a pod without asking. He opened it, adding peas to her bowl. They worked in silence, the comfortable kind that came from being around someone long enough to not need words for everything. Hoofbeats on the road. Shadow's head came up, tail wagging before Caleb even saw who it was. Mrs. Caldwell on her bay mare, riding easy. She waved, called out, "Got mail for you. Cal? Tom asked me to bring it since I was heading this way." Mail. Caleb stood, walked to meet her at the property line. She handed down 2 letters, both addressed to him, one from Tucson lawyer's office. Had to be, one from Fort Apache. His chest tightened. Fort Apache, where Nalen's son was. "Thank you. Mrs. Caldwell." "You staying for supper?" "Helen?" Nalen called from the porch. First name basis. That had happened sometime in the last month. Caleb wasn't sure when. "Can't today. I've got to get back before William realizes I borrowed his good mare." She smiled. "But I'll come by next week. I want to hear how that court business goes." She rode off. Caleb stood there, holding the letters. Nalen had stopped shelling peas. She was staring at the Fort Apache envelope, hands frozen mid-motion. He walked back, handed them to her. "Should probably read these." She took them like they might burn her. Opened the Tucson letter first. Her eyes moved across the page. Once, twice, she handed it to Caleb. Legal letterhead. Benjamin Carlisle, attorney at law. Court date set January 15th, 4 months away. Case looks strong. Territorial judge had questions about the warrant's basis. Father Marquez's testimony would be crucial. Railroad's lawyers were filing motions, but the judge seemed inclined to hear the case properly. Optimistic, the letter said, but cautious. Nalen's hands were shaking as she opened the Fort Apache letter. She read it, closed her eyes, read it again, handed it to Caleb without a word. He read, "Mrs. Nalen C. Following review of documentation provided by your legal counsel and testimony from Father Marquez regarding the circumstances of your son's enrollment, we have determined that proper maternal consent was not obtained. Ashkeet Say enrolled as Thomas. C has been released from Fort Apache Indian School effective immediately and is currently in the care of Father Marquez at San Xavier Mission, pending your arrival. Please contact the mission to arrange pickup at your earliest convenience. Superintendent J.S. Morrison, Fort Apache Indian School. Caleb read it 3 times, making sure it said what he thought it said. They released him, he said. Nalin nodded. Couldn't speak. Her shoulders were shaking. Not crying, something bigger than crying. Relief so profound it had nowhere to go except out through her whole body. Caleb set the letter down. Let her have the moment. Shadow moved to her side, pressed his head against her knee. She put one hand on the dog's head, the other covering her mouth. Long minutes passed before she could speak. He's at the mission. Father Marquez has him. Letter says to come get him when you're ready. She stopped, looked at him. I can go tomorrow. Ride to Tucson. It's 3 days if I don't stop. That's soon. I've waited 3 months already. Feels like years. She paused. Will you come with me? The question hung there. Going to Tucson meant 3 days' ride each way, meant leaving the property, meant being visible together. The railroad was still watching. He saw scouts sometimes, distant figures on ridges. But they hadn't made another move, waiting for the court date, probably, letting lawyers handle it. Yeah, he said. I'll come. She nodded, picked up another pea pod. Her hands were steadier now. He won't remember me. Not really. He was 8 when they took him. Changed now. 3 months of them telling him his name is Thomas. His mother abandoned him. His people are savages. You'll still be his mother. Will I? Her voice went quiet. What if he doesn't want to come back? What if he thinks I left him there on purpose? Caleb didn't have an answer for that. Didn't know what you told a woman who'd lost her son and was terrified of getting him back. You fought for him, he said finally. Kept the papers safe, got a lawyer, stood up to the railroad. That counts for something. Does it? It does to me. She looked at him then, really looked. Something passed between them. Not love, not yet, but understanding, recognition. 2 people who'd been broken, learning to be whole again. She went back to shelling peas. They worked until the bowl was full. Caleb took it inside, started preparing supper, salt pork, beans, the cornbread he'd finally learned to make without burning. Not as good as Sarah's had been, but edible. Nalin came in, moved around the kitchen, like she'd been doing it for years instead of months. They'd developed rhythms here. She cooked, he cleaned, or he cooked and she cleaned. Or they both worked together and the work got done twice as fast. After supper, they sat on the porch, sun touching the horizon, turning everything gold, shadow at their feet, full from table scraps. The evening was cool, comfortable. October sliding toward November, winter coming, but not yet. Caleb felt his hand move to his shirt pocket, to the harmonica he'd started carrying a month ago. First time in 3 years he'd taken it off the mantel. Felt strange having it there, pressing against his chest, but felt right too, like carrying something of Sarah with him instead of leaving her in the past. He pulled it out, looked at it. The metal was still tarnished, still needed polishing. But it worked. The reed still caught air, still made sound. You gonna play it, Nalin asked, thinking about it. What's stopping you? Last time I got 3 notes before I couldn't breathe. A month before that. Try it again? Got through first verse. Try for the rest this time. He put the harmonica to his lips, drew breath, started playing Red River Valley. The first verse came easier than before. Muscle memory. Maybe. Or maybe just finally being ready. He got through the first verse, kept going. Second verse. His fingers found the notes, breath pushing through the reeds, steady and sure. The sound carried across the yard, out toward the Badlands where men had wanted to kill them 3 months ago, where some probably still did. Shadow lifted his head, listening, not howling this time, just listening. Third verse. Caleb felt something loosening in his chest. Not breaking, loosening, like a knot finally untying after being pulled tight for 8 years. He kept playing. Fourth verse. The last verse. The one about parting and sorrow and promises. Sarah's favorite. The one she'd asked him to play the night before she went into labor. The last time he'd heard this song complete. He finished. Let the last note fade into the evening air. Lowered the harmonica. Nayland had been humming along. Harmony line, soft under the melody. She'd learned it at the mission school. She'd told him once, stopped when he stopped. That was all 4 verses, she said. Yeah. How do you feel? He thought about that. Not better grief didn't work like that. Didn't just disappear because you played a song, but different, lighter. Like he'd finally said goodbye properly. Like Sarah could rest now that he'd stopped pretending she was still waiting for him. Like I can breathe again, he said. Shadow was asleep, head on his paws, the dog who'd dragged him back into the world, who'd refused to let him hide, getting old, gray around the muzzle, but content. Job done. Nayland stood, tested her leg out of habit. It held, though he could see the slight hitch in her step. Would always be there. Permanent reminder of the bullet graze and the infection that had almost killed her. I should start packing. For Tucson, we'll need supplies. I'll handle supplies tomorrow. You should rest. Build your strength. I've been resting for 3 months. Then rest 1 more day. She looked at him, smiled slack-eyed. You're bossy sometimes. Cavalry medic comes with the habit. She went inside. Caleb stayed on the porch, watching stars appear. Same stars Sarah used to watch with him. Same porch they'd sat on, planning a future that had ended in 2 coffins and 8 years of silence. But maybe a new future was starting. Not the one he'd planned, and not the one Sarah would have wanted. But a future anyway. One where he spoke to people, ate regular meals, played the harmonica without falling apart. One where a woman and her son might stay, might build something here, might turn this property from a tomb into a home. He wasn't fool enough to think it would be easy. The court date was coming. Railroad wouldn't give up. Mercer would be back with lawyers and motions and every legal trick he could find. The fight was far from over. But tonight, sitting on his porch with a sleeping dog at his feet, and the smell of cornbread still in the air, and the sound of someone else moving around in his house tonight felt like a beginning. Nayland appeared in the doorway. You coming in a minute. She nodded, went back inside. Through the window, he could see her moving around, checking supplies, making lists, preparing for the trip to get her son. Daily tasks that anchored you to a place, to a purpose, to a life worth living. Caleb looked at his hands, calloused from fence work, stained from tools and wire, getting older. 47 now, 50 coming faster than he liked to think about. But still here, still breathing, still capable of doing something that mattered. He stood, tucked the harmonica back in his pocket. "Come on, boy," he said to Shadow. Shadow stood, stretched, followed him inside. Nalin was at the table, writing. Letter to the mission, probably, telling them she was coming, telling her son to hold on just a little longer. Caleb moved to the mantel. Sarah's wedding ring sat there, next to the document case. He put it back there after the confrontation with Mercer. Visible now. Not hidden under his shirt. Not pretending it wasn't there. Just letting it be part of the house again. Part of the life that continued after she was gone. Next to it, the empty space where the harmonica had sat for 3 years. Not empty anymore. The harmonica lived in his pocket now. Played again, used again. Not forgotten, but not gathering dust either. He touched both spaces where the ring sat, where the harmonica had been, past and present, grief and hope, the things that made a life worth living even when living hurt. "You all right?" Nalin asked. He turned. "Yeah, more all right than I've been in a long time." "You sure?" "More sure than I was 3 months ago. More sure than I was 8 years ago." She nodded. Went back to her letter. Shadow settled by the stove, circling 3 times before lying down. Caleb sat at the table, pulled out a paper, started his own letter, to Hackett, thanking him for sending Father Marquez, telling him about the court date, asking if he'd testify if needed. Writing came easier now. Words flowed. He finished the letter, sealed it, set it aside for tomorrow's mail. Outside, the wind picked up, not storm wind, just evening breeze, carrying the smell of sage and dust and the promise of colder weather coming. January would bring the court date, would bring Nalin's son home from the mission, would bring whatever the railroad had planned next. But January was months away. Tonight was now. Caleb looked across the table at Nalin, bent over her letter, at Shadow sleeping by the stove, at the lamplight making everything soft and warm, at his house not empty anymore, not silent anymore, not a place where a man went to die slowly, just a house where people lived. Some stories stay with you, not because they tie everything neat, but because they touch something familiar, that quiet ache of knowing you've been hiding from people, from pain, from the risk of caring again when caring once cost you everything. Many of us have stood where Caleb stood, counted days instead of living them, chose silence over the mess of being known. We've all lost something we couldn't replace: a person, a version of ourselves, years that slipped past while we waited for the grief to feel manageable. And perhaps you felt that particular heaviness of realizing, too late, that protecting yourself from more loss also meant protecting yourself from more life. There's something tender in watching someone choose to step back into the world even when the world hasn't promised to be kind, even when the odds are bad and the outcome uncertain. Not because it's heroic, but because it's human, that stubborn insistence on mattering again, on being part of something bigger than your own for a while. This story doesn't tie everything neat. The court case is still coming. The railroad hasn't given up. Nalin's son may not remember her the way she remembers him, but tonight there's cornbread cooling and a harmonica played through to the end. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that has to be enough. Thank you for sitting with this, for staying through the quiet parts and the hard parts both.